Hello and welcome back to More Than Milestones. I am so excited today to be joined by Dr. Morgan Cutlip, who has a PhD in psychology. She is a relationship specialist for over 15 years, and she is a two-time author of How to Love Your Kids Without Losing Yourself and A Better Share. We are here today talking all things mental health, marriage, and motherhood. And mental load really more than anything. But Morgan, I would love for you to just tell us a little bit about yourself. Where can people find you, your resources, and then we'll dig right in.
Okay, this is always the hardest question for me. So a little bit about myself. I live in Southern California. I'm from Ohio. Yeah, married my high school sweetheart, but we did not date the whole time. So I say that so I don't lose street cred. We reconnected on MySpace. So now you know how old I am.
Oh my God. Was he one of your top 7? Is that
People always ask. I feel like I joined basically because it was like, I think I had like a passive account and I like got like a notification from him. And so then I like activated it or whatever. I don't know. I was never on there. And I have 2 kids who are now, which is blowing my mind. Our daughter Effie is 12 and our son Roy is 9. So we're in like a whole different season, which is pretty wild. And yeah, what else? Where you can find me, I'm on Instagram, Dr. Morgan Cutlip. My website is the exact same, drmorgancutlip.com. And yeah, my 2 books. My 2 books are really where my heart lives. So you can find me there.
Love it. Awesome. Okay, so let's get right into it because I think this is such an important but huge conversation, and I am so excited to talk all about it. So let's just start kind of talking with the motherhood mental load, like what that really means. We all hear it, we all talk about it, and I think we all like deeply understand it. But what does that really mean, and how do we start the conversation towards change, really? So one of my favorite things about your work is that you really emphasize how one of the heaviest and most draining parts of the mental load is explaining what the mental load is, like having to actually put that into words. Can you tell me a little bit more about kind of what you mean by that?
Yeah. So I'm happy to define the mental load because I think we all feel it sort of just like viscerally, like we just experience it. We live it in our lives as mothers, but a lot of times we don't have the language to articulate it in a way that really like puts a framework around it and helps us really be able to even explain it to our partners in conversation. A lot of times when we're like, oh, we're so overwhelmed, we end up just kind of like listing all the stuff that's overwhelming us. And then we get these terrible responses, which are like, make me a list, tell me what to do. You make things harder on yourself than you need to. And so becomes really just like a frustrating sort of dynamic in relationships. So one of the reasons why it feels heaviest, that piece around explaining it is because a lot of times when we try to explain it to our partners, we struggle to have the language to really communicate it in a clear way, and they struggle to understand it. And when they respond in a way, which like the most common responses I hear from men usually around the mental load is either defensiveness, dismissiveness, or something I call the hardship Olympics, which is like, well, I'm tired too, or I'm busy too, or look at all that I do. So now you're like competing in this like thing that nobody wins. All of this just piles on this feeling of being alone in it all. And I think as women, as mothers carrying all this, we already feel quite invisible. We already feel kind of alone in it. And so when we come to our partners after we've like mustered up this energy to explain it and they don't get it, or worse off, they push back, we end up feeling really isolated. And then we're just faced with this like crappy situation, which is, do we shove it down and just put our heads down and just like white knuckle it through life and continue to carry it, building resentment and frustration toward our partner? Or do we push on and keep mustering up that energy to try to break through? And that can lead to a lot of hurt if you don't get anywhere. I believe like this is one of the biggest sort of sticking points around the mental load is how do we get on the same page, share the same language, and be able to talk about it without it spiraling into an argument. And a lot of what A Better Share is actually about.
Yeah. And now I feel like, so it's interesting for me, being able to actually share with Jay what the mental load was took like 2 kids and like 5 years. And it is still hard for me to even put into words, like, again, just like you said, like I'll be like, I feel so overwhelmed. And he's like, well, what's overwhelming you? And I'm like, how do I even explain that I'm thinking about the school supplies and I'm thinking about the eval I have to type and I'm thinking about, what I'm making for lunch tomorrow and do we need groceries and is there toilet paper in there? And I think for him, where we've come to a good place is like, I don't need him. I think my expectation was for him to also anticipate all of those things. And I not only was I not giving him the opportunity to do that because I was dealing with postpartum anxiety and giving up control was just
Sure.
like not going to happen, but I also think that like that expectation that I had while also still wanting to control it all, it was just like a trifecta of stress really for
Yes.
everyone involved. So how would you suggest if someone is like, okay, well, actually, let's go this route.
There's a lot of
Why do
routes
we
you could go.
I know. Why is it that, or why do you feel the mental load falls primarily on women so often?
Can we define it? Do you mind if I
Yeah,
hijack the question and then we can
go
talk
for
about
it.
that? Because I feel
Yeah,
like, what you described when you were trying to explain it to Jay, and you're like, it kind of what I said too. Like, you just list all the stuff that overwhelms you, and then you want them to anticipate it and they don't. Like, that is a huge issue for a lot of people. So if I can define it, maybe it will like help some of your listeners have some like
yeah,
language and also some understanding as to why partners struggle to get it. And then it like leads into
totally.
your next question. But if I define the mental load like 30,000 foot overview, it is the seemingly never ending running to do list we carry around in our heads that has two key components. So the first is that the majority of the tasks are invisible. It's really because it's invisible, it's hard to get appreciation around this stuff. It's hard to have our partners like understand all that's happening because like they don't even see that it's happening. They're not even aware that it's happening. And then the second piece is that it takes up cognitive real estate. This just means that it crowds out space in our brains that's otherwise could be dedicated to like way more enjoyable things and necessary things like patience, emotional regulation, creativity, getting in the mood for sex. Like all that stuff requires space in our minds. But most like modern day women today have such a full brain that it's hard to even access some of that stuff, which is why we're often so overwhelmed and so anxious and so stressed out. Okay, so here's the in the weeds definition, which I think can be helpful, and especially for men. So I did interviews for my book with men and women on the mental load, and one of the women was like, "You need to make a visual of what it is because, like, I just can't figure out how to explain it." So I created a visual and I put it in the book, and it is three concentric circles, so like a Venn diagram, and it represents the three domains of tasks involved in the mental load. So the first domain is the physical. This is like taking out the garbage, mowing the lawn, just the act, like doing the dishes. This is what men think the mental load is. That's why they say, make me a list. I'll just knock it out. Like, what's your problem? Why are you so overwhelmed? Just do the things. It's because they think it's the physical tasks. That's just one piece. The second piece is the mental. So that's like the making of lists. So I got to go to the grocery store. What do I need? What am I doing for work today? It's like that sort of stuff. The third domain is the emotional labor. This is where men and women kind of split. This is what men often fail, like stereotypically, and sort of fail to understand what's going on. The emotional labor is the regular and ongoing cause and effect calculations typically women are making on behalf of members of their family to maximize positive experiences. So if your like partner doesn't do these calculations in the same way, you're going to be like really resistant to handing this stuff off. You're going to worry things are going to fall through the cracks. The stakes feel really high. It's really hard to outsource or hire anybody because you got to really know your family and the people you love really well to do this type of work. So the last piece, this is like a long ramble, but like the last piece is where these three circles intersect. And I call this the triple threat. And here's what we need to know. And what women everywhere, if you're like, why am I so overwhelmed? This is why. The majority of tasks involved in home and family life occur in the triple threat domain, which means each task unpacks to contain physical, mental, and emotional work. Like dinner's not just dinner. Dinner is like, what do you need from the store? Thinking through recipes. It's actually making it. And then it's also things like, how am I going to make something everybody eats so we don't have a meltdown later and they'll like sit through dinner and that they're not asking for a bar at bedtime. And so each little item on your to-do list unpacks to contain all of this head and heart work that is incredibly taxing for the majority of women.
So that is incredibly insightful, and I feel like my very like the thing that comes to mind the most is like, how could you possibly hand that off? Like, like how? Like, how do I do it? How do I start? Because it's like, I think it's so easy to look at that higher level, But what you just explained in terms of all the facets, but also all the building facets is so that's exactly it. Like
Mhm.
it's never ending. And it's like no matter what you anticipate, there's always something else. There's always more. So how do you start the conversation in a way that's
I
going to
know, it's
get you
overwhelming,
somewhere?
isn't it?
Yeah, yeah. And that's another thing. It's like another thing that I'm like, I'll just do it, you know?
I know.
And it's not because Jay is not wonderful. It's not because he doesn't have his own stuff that he handles that I appreciate in that way, but it's just different. Yeah. I don't even, yeah. How do you start that conversation?
Yeah. So I know it's overwhelming. You should see me when I sat down to write the book. I'm like, where do I begin? Because I mean, there's another book out there called Fair Play, which is amazing, which I think handles the logistical tasks. So like, how do you literally like hand things off? Handles that brilliantly. It's like a game. I think if your partner's into that and they're willing to do it, it's amazing. But I think there's also like this other piece, which is that solving the mental load, getting to a place where it feels better in your relationship is kind of a relationship issue. Not just the logistics of life. It's not just like handing off the tasks. It's like we have to be able to feel like we're seen and we're appreciated and you understand it. And like, how do we show up for each other when life is really busy for both of us? And like, how do we? So that's really like the part of it I wanted to address in my book, not just like the logistical handoff, because I think that's like kind of been done pretty well. So, a couple of things. Number one, how you initiate the conversation is really important. And, if you spend any time on social media and you go down the mental load rabbit hole, it's kind of a volatile topic where there's a lot of hostility toward men, which I fully understand. I get it. I've been really angry many, many times in my life about this, which is why I've like dedicated my work to trying to serve people around this because I get it. But also heading into the conversation with that sort of demeanor or that tone is going to really set you down a bad path really quickly. So the way that I approach the conversation is kind of like this bigger sort of mindset shift, which is that your partner is not the enemy. The mental load is the enemy. So let's externalize that. That's the problem. And it's not untrue. I mean, modern family life is absolutely relentless. We have way more on our plates than is reasonable for two people to manage. Usually both people are working. We have these really high expectations for how we parent and how we do everything. Extracurriculars are nonstop. We're pulled out of the presence. We feel pressure to be productive. Like the mental load is insane for modern families. So,
Yeah.
how can we as a couple say, okay, you're not my enemy. It feels like it. It feels like you are. I'm mad at you because this isn't handled in a way that feels good to me. Usually for the woman, doesn't feel fair. But let's just look at the reality of our life, which is we have more on our plates than is reasonable for us to handle. And right now it's being handled in a way that feels not great to me. And usually our partners sense our overwhelm and our tension and they don't love it. Like usually they're kind of afraid of it, is what I've seen when I've done research on this.
Yeah.
And so you can sort of point that out. You probably feel my intensity. I'm like in go mode all of the time. And I'm sure you don't like it. And I don't love who I've become. This is not how I wanted to experience motherhood and family life. And so I want to talk about this thing called the mental load. And I want to talk about how you and I can navigate it differently so that we both feel better in our relationship. And so if you can sort of align as a same team with that being your common enemy, that usually gives you your best chance of having a productive conversation.
I love that. And I want to take it back to when you talked about the hardship Olympics before, because we're going to talk about the
Yeah.
mental load and marriage and partnership. But I think that is such an important term. And it was definitely a big part of what Jay and I had to overcome because our kind of division when we moved in together and had this house and got married and had our first child was that he was kind of going to handle everything outside the house, right? Mowing
Yeah.
the lawn, doing the garbage, doing all that stuff. And I was going to handle everything in the house, which when you look at a side by side list, perfect, great, no problem.
Yeah.
But that's not accounting for all of that other mental load beyond the physical that was really took a toll. And so it would be like, I would feel unappreciated. I would feel
Yeah.
completely overwhelmed and like I wasn't doing a good job at anything, not at being a mom, not at being a wife, not at being a physical therapist. And so I would come at him with only, look at all the things I'm doing. Look at
Yep.
how hard this is for me. And his immediate response would always be that defensiveness. And well, I take care of all this stuff out here
Yep.
and you don't appreciate that, which was totally true on both sides.
Yeah.
I wasn't appreciating it. I wasn't recognizing it because I was so overwhelmed by my own everything, and I feel like that it took us a long time, probably a year, to work through that in a way that we could communicate and I could be like, listen, this is too much for me. I cannot even think about this. I need you to own this. And then to refine back from there to a place where I wasn't having to get to that place of overwhelm and just shoving things at him, where we could actually like divide it. But I think even just approaching the conversation when you're worried about getting hit with defensiveness, because
Hmm.
maybe you're coming at them with defensiveness too, right? I think that
Yes.
can be part of what holds people back from even trying or even approaching it. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's a very common struggle. So in trying to think which direction I want to go here because there's a lot to say. But in the book, one of the things that sort of like it concludes with is I give couples an agenda for regularly touching base around the mental load. And like part of why you have to do this is because it changes every single day. My childcare is like I don't have it today, so like was scrambling and rearranging and doing all these things. So my mental load shifted in like an instant when I found out I didn't have that, and that happens every single day. Sometimes it's heavier. Sometimes, back to school, it's like the intensity of the emotional labor and the mental load increases. And so if every time you need to like approach your partner about support, it turns into this massive argument, at some point you're going to just stop. It's not going to be worth the energy and like the hurt that accumulates after those conversations. So part of the work is getting to a place where talking about it. So I give like I said, an agenda for a regular check-in can be like 10, 15 minutes. But talking about it so regularly, it's like a natural rhythm of your relationship, where it's just like, here's what's on my plate. Here's who's handling what. How are we navigating this week? How can I support you? Here's how you can support me. And no, it's not personal. It's like, these are the like business meetings of our family life. And so it's so important that couples are able to do that. So you don't get to a place where you're like about to explode because you're so frustrated and resentful and overwhelmed, but you're just like kind of regularly touching base and keeping tabs on some of this stuff. I'll
Yeah.
say though too, another thing I think that is just important to point out is when I interviewed men and women, but I did survey data on women. And one of the questions was, what do you want most from your partner around the mental load? And two things very clear at the top. Number one, initiative taking, which that kind of like lends into the emotional labor. We want this like anticipation of needs piece. And then the second thing is more appreciation. And that is such a simple one to give that most people really stink at giving, but can immediately change your relationship if you step into it. And so I think like one of like the calls to action for men in my book, and I wrote a book that men so far have really liked, which is like, I feel like is like, that is a win for me, is like, you have to learn how to step into more initiative taking. And part of how you do that is you have to increase knowing, because anticipating needs and all these things requires like a deep knowledge of members of your family. That's how you can think about, this is what they're going to need. This is how they're going to react. How do I mitigate this? And so men have to learn how to increase their knowing around their kids, their partner, and their family life so that they can step into initiation with confidence and competence. Because I think those are the two things that shut them down. They're worried they're going to get it wrong, or they're worried they're not, doing it in the way that their partner wants it done. And so I have a formula in the book. It's called the Buffett formula. It's from Warren Buffett. And he had this mentality where every day you go to bed knowing more than the morning when you woke up. And so how can men every single day get to know three new things? One thing about their partner, one thing about how their home and family functions, and one thing about their kids. And the more they accumulate knowledge around home and family life, the more they can put that knowledge into action and take initiative.
I love that. I love that. And it's funny. I'll never forget my mom when Jay and I first started living together. He was doing something. He was either vacuuming or doing the dishes. And my mom was over and I said something to the effect of like, I wouldn't do it that way. Like, it's okay. Just leave it. I got it. And my mom was like, don't do that. Don't do that. She was like, don't set yourself up for a lifetime of that.
Yes. Good
Let him
advice.
do it his way. Let him fail. Let him whatever. And I think that especially for people who need that control or have,
Yeah.
are dealing with postpartum anxiety or depression or things where having that piece of control is so important. It can be really hard to even give them the chance to initiate, which is definitely a big piece of what I ran into. And then it's like backtracking and
You
working
just
through
ensure that
changing that.
yeah, you just ensure that you carry it when you, like, don't get out of their way. This is, like, the
Totally.
part of the mental load that people don't wanna talk about on social media, which is that, like, there in for some relationships, there's, like, this correction culture that will happen where it's like he'll step in and be like, "That's not how I do it. I do it like this." Almost like we've become the authority on the right way, and so it shuts down participation. uh, Over time, that really accumulates to the point where now we have like a partner who is completely passive. Make me a list, tell me what to do. Like, you're better at it than me. We call, it's like weaponized incompetence, but sometimes that's developed over time. Not putting anyone at fault here. These are just like
I was at
patterns
fault.
we fall, they're just
I
patterns
was
we fall
totally at
into.
fault.
We don't even
Yeah.
know what we're doing. Like, we don't
Yeah.
even mean to do it. And I think sometimes, like, the way we get, really deeply entrenched as women in the mental load is, like, well-intentioned and stuff, but it's like we find ourselves in these deeply entrenched patterns that we have to identify, and we have to kinda, like, walk back. But your
Mhm.
mom, you said it was your mom?
Yeah.
I mean,
Yep.
that's incredible advice. In the book, I say,
Mhm.
"Let them fail, let them figure it out, and find their own methodology." Like, get out of the way.
Mhm.
Let them do it.
Yeah, yeah.
It's hard.
And it is. Sometimes it's so much easier said than done, but it's so important. And even too with the appreciation piece, it's like, of course, I know how much like that little compliment gives me. Like, like when
Yeah.
he's like, "Hey, babe, thanks for taking care of that." I'm like, "Oh my God," for like a week.
Yes.
But then I forget to do the same thing for him. Like, "Hey babe, thanks
Yes.
for keeping the grass nice. Thanks for keeping the outside of the house looking the same way." And I think a lot of times when you're, at least for me, when I was in that really difficult place of feeling like I was doing everything all the time, it was really easy for me to be like, "Well, I want to be appreciated," while I also was not in any way giving that back. And I think sometimes like the hardest part is kind of removing yourself from that piece of the conversation and
Yes.
looking at it from the top down perspective. Hey friends, Casey here. If you've ever listened to an episode and thought, "I wish she'd go even deeper," or "I wonder what she really thinks about that," I am so excited to share More Than Milestones Unfiltered, where I do exactly that. More Than Milestones Unfiltered is my private Substack community where I share 2 exclusive podcast episodes every single month. 2 episodes that will never make it to Instagram or the public feed. These are the even more raw, unfiltered stories, harder conversations, and the "that's a story for another day" moments I usually hold back on. If you want to join me there, just head to the show notes or my link in bio and subscribe. I'd love to see you inside. I really love how you talk about the 2 reasons that relationships or marriages fail. Can you tell us a little bit about how that all ties in here?
Yeah, so the 2 reasons are sort of like this sort of big event type of reason for a marriage falling apart, which is something like infidelity or addiction or just something really major that disrupts the relationship. But the other is more common, which is more, I think I call it the slow erosion, which is like the way a couple stops really like showing up for each other. So it's like the busyness of life comes in, kind of how you talked about feeling really overwhelmed, being received as criticism, and suddenly your partner not feeling like the person you can come to when you need something or you need support. They become unsafe, unreliable, and this starts to erode trust in the relationship. When this starts to happen, then this feeling of I am alone in my relationship, I cannot depend on my partner, I cannot trust them, starts to really create these deep roots in the relationship. And before you know it, it's kind of like this sort of, I don't know, separation in the relationship. So you're next to each other, but you're not connected anymore, starts to develop. And it's, we're by each other, but we don't even talk. They don't even know what's going on in my life. I'm not sure I can say anything without triggering them anymore. We haven't had sex in a month, in 6 months, in a year. And this distance starts to breed. And what happens to a lot of couples, I remember like way back when I was working on my dissertation, I was looking at reasons for divorce. And it was like this study that actually looked at like what people put on there when they got divorced, what they put down for the reason. And 2 of the most common were growing apart and falling out of love. It's like, well, how does this happen? That's a slow
Right.
erosion. That's when you get to a place where you have been so disconnected for so long that you look back and you're like, I don't even love you anymore because all of this mistrust, all of this distance starts to erode the feelings of closeness and connection. And I think there's lots of ways that happens in our relationships, but I am a believer that the mental load and how it is navigated in a partnership can become one of the sort of like beginning points to that disconnection that can
Yeah.
slowly chip away at your closeness and your connection and your relationship. And because kids keep us so busy, we can kind of look the other way. We can put our heads down and power through. And then we reach a point where it kind of all comes to a head. We're like, what happened to us? And by that
Yeah.
point, it can be hard to come back from.
I feel like that it's a really important conversation too, because I think in a lot of ways, like for me, as you're talking about this, it keeps coming up like how almost, I don't want to say normalized, but how normalized it is to enter that kind of roommate phase
Yeah.
after having kids, right? Like when there's just so much else, there's so many other things that like that your relationship and that priority and carving out that time that you used to, I feel like oftentimes gets brushed off as like, okay, we're just in this hard season, and maybe you are, like you are, obviously,
Yeah.
but what point does that shift into becoming really like leading into that erosive, like, I don't know, do you know what I'm trying to say, like
Yeah, I mean, I think like, yeah, because there are some people who are like, well, we're just in the roommate phase, and that makes sense given, we got young kids, we got a
yeah,
busyness of life, and that's just normal. So there are people that do normalize that, and I think that is that's potentially a danger. Like, I don't want to fear monger anybody, but like that's kind of a misleading message. So it's sort of like put an asterisk by normalizing that because it kind of depends. So if you're roommates and you're like, we're like BFF roommates and
yeah,
everything's great and like we're feeling connected in terms of like we love each other and we like each other, but we're just like not going on dates and stuff. That's one thing. But if you become roommates and you're accumulating hurts and you're developing negative patterns of interacting with one another, which is what often happens, right? The building of resentment, the little snarky comments, the defensiveness that erodes feelings of trust. That stuff starts to chip away at your relationship. And so to say, and then when we're not as busy, my kids are 9 and 12, we're still busy, and it's different busy. I kind of prefer this busy, but it's, still, but when you like reemerge from that, it's not like that stuff goes away. It's like, did we hurt each other so much in this roommate season that we can't find each other? So I think we have to be careful of assuming that our relationships just autocorrect at a certain season of life and of parenthood, because that is not a bet I would be willing to place
yeah,
on something as important as my marriage and my family life. So I think it's really important to, your relationship might not be coming first, but are you caring for it? Are you making adjustments as needed? And are you making sure you're not really accumulating hurts that are going to kind of erode your feelings of love toward one another?
yeah. And I think part of it too for me is like I think there's also this narrative around relationships and date nights and all of that, but also around self-care, and that like it has to be all or nothing, right? Like if we're not going out on formal dates, if I'm not going out for a girls trip flying across the country, then I'm not, the
Oh,
shower is not
gosh.
self-care, or the at-home date night is not self-care. And I feel like that was a huge shift for Jay and I, for us to just be like, you know what, like it's okay that my anxiety wasn't letting us leave anyone with the kids. We can put the kids to bed and then we can just sit together and just sit by the fire outside or something. I think part of that, like again, that all or nothing mentality, it feels so pervasive on
Yes.
social media, especially when you see the way other people are apparently doing things, or I don't know.
Yeah, and then that shuts things I think it shuts people down where you're just like, "Well, I can't do all that, so then I do nothing."
Yeah.
Really it's like these little moments can actually make a big difference. So, one of my favorite like moments with my husband is when the kids are just being absolute bananas and they're maybe being obnoxious or, the kids being kids. And we'll be kind of like on opposite sides of the room and we'll make eye contact and we'll just be like, like it's like this moment of you're like, I see you. It's you. We're aligned. Like we're together. Like how
Yeah.
annoying are these kids right now? It's just like these moments of connection and feeling like it's still us, I think are really important. For a long time, we would watch comedians at bedtime together, which is like really humor is so key in a marriage. It's a really big factor in terms of like buffering negative feelings. So we would do stuff. I mean, we weren't doing that for that reason. We just enjoy it. But that's always really something fun you can do. So I think there's like, and same with self care for mom, but there's these little moments that really can help to kind of like build up more momentum of positivity in the relationship that we shouldn't discount and that actually are really, really important. I'd rather have 100 little moments than like one date night a quarter, you know?
Mhm.
So I think it's important for people to know walking by each other and like touching during the day, just, I see you in this chaos and I love you and we're in it together. Like anything that promotes that camaraderie is so important. And I think, my first book was for moms and I like had this beef with how self-care is talked about in mainstream media and social media, which is like this laundry list of things that moms need to do to take care of themselves. And like, I don't know about your feed, but my feed right now is all like all this biohacking, where it's just like, oh my
Oh my god.
gosh, there are not enough
I know.
hours in the day. And the reality is that like we don't need more lists of things to do in the time we don't have. And then we feel guilty that we can't do all the things. And so I think it's important, even as moms think about how we care for ourselves, there are little ways, I talk about a bunch of them in my book, but there are little ways of doing this like micro self care, these little tiny adjustments through our day that do move the needle in deep and meaningful ways that help us to feel so much better in motherhood and also in marriage.
Yeah. Yeah. And now, like, I think part of what often comes up for moms specifically is really like even thinking about taking the time to figure out what you need or figure out what is it that I want help with? What is it that can even feel overwhelming on top of then trying to express it and have that positive conversation? Do you have tips or advice on really like identifying what it is that you need so that you can express it effectively?
I think something that seems to resonate for most moms, and it was for sure something for me, which is that we are so good at backburnering ourselves for the sake of our relationships that we start to become very disassociated or disconnected from who we are, which is part of the reason why it makes it hard to like access what we need when the time comes where we actually have a little bit of space to maybe like speak them out, or even we have time alone. I mean, we've all had that moment where we're alone and we're like, do I do laundry? Do I take a bath? Do I read a book? Do I exercise? Like, what do I do? Because it's just everything is a drop in the bucket because we've been suppressing and ignoring and making our needs small for so long. So this is super, super common. So if you're listening and you're like, oh, I thought it was me, it's not just you. It's super common for moms to really have trouble accessing what we need. I think so, like a big picture way, and I'll give a real specific way. So, big picture way, and I talk about this in my first book, which is that you have to get good at doing these like tiny little self check ins with yourself. So, I tend to do them when I go to the bathroom because it's like a little moment of peace, usually, where you just kind of like do a self scan. Like, how am I doing? What do I need? I give a framework for that in the book because if we're so disconnected from ourselves, we have to start to come back into connection with ourselves so we are more tuned with what we need. We're so like ignoring ourselves so much of our day. So that's like a big picture piece to just regularly practice. But in terms of specific advice, one of the fastest ways to figure out what you need is to think about what you complain about the most. And if you don't complain, we usually walk around the house like muttering something in irritation. Like I call them monologues. We like do these, like we'll speak them out or we're like muttering around the house. Just take a minute and maybe like write it down or just be like, what am I muttering right now? Like for me, it would be, guess I'm the only one who sees this. I'd be like doing that kind of stuff.
I do that all the time.
Yeah, we all do it. We all do it. Nobody talks about it. We all do it. It's like our
Oh,
irritated
man.
muttering. So
Yeah.
if you pay attention to what you're saying, it is a window into an unmet need. And so that then becomes something where you're like, okay, I got to package this in a way that's like consumable to other people because like me just muttering it passive aggressively is not an effective strategy, but that becomes the thing that you got to define. So then you got to figure out how am I going to speak this out in a way that gets me, moves the needle. gets me the support
Yeah.
I need. Or maybe sometimes it's a need that we need to take ownership of. Moms are notorious for outsourcing our needs. As soon as somebody gives me a moment, then I'll take it. It's like, no, take the moment. Take the moment. Stop
Yeah.
waiting for somebody to like take on your self-care. So
Yeah.
that's also something to pay attention to. Is this a need I need to ask somebody to help me with, or is this a need I can take charge of?
I love that. And it's so funny because I was really thinking as I was putting together kind of the outline of what I was hoping we could touch on, I was really thinking a lot about mom guilt and how ingrained in moms it is in a way that it is very much not for me at least, in a way that it's very much not for Jay. Like, for example, over the weekend, he was like doing stuff outside. He had a ton of stuff to get done. He got it all done. I was inside hanging with the kids. He came inside and he was like, I want to take a nap if that's all right. And I was like, yeah, of course. And I truly didn't mind. But I was thinking about it afterwards and I'm like, I would feel so much guilt, which makes no sense if I wanted to take care of what I needed to take care of and then like take a nap. I would be like, I'm missing time with the kids. I should be with them. I should be making memories with them. They're home. And I talked to him about it later and I'm like, isn't it weird to you that that even like goes through my head? And he's like, yeah, because that would literally never cross my mind. Like not even a little bit. And I'm like, why is that? Why
And
is
that's like
that?
nearly universal, by the way. Not
What?
completely. There's always exceptions. There's a lot to unpack there. But so we can't unpack all that. But that is nearly universal. So I had this conversation with my husband because he travels every week. And I was like, don't you feel guilty about how much you miss with the kids? And he goes, no. He goes, I feel sad I miss them, but I don't feel guilty. And he goes, I'm earning a living for our family. So I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing. I mean, I work too. So it's not as if, you know, he's the sole earner in our family. But I do think, and this kind of connects to around like how the mental load gets fuller for women. But like one thing is that we've been socialized completely differently. So men have been socialized, and I know this sounds archaic and times are changing, but it still lives in us pretty deeply. Men are socialized to provide and protect financial and physical safety for their family. If they do that, they have checked the primary boxes of their role. They might not even be fully aware of it, but I bet if you ask men, they'll say, yeah, I worry about finances and money. Like, that's my main thing.
Absolutely.
And so the other stuff is like gravy sometimes to them. I'm painting with such broad strokes. So if anyone's getting irritated by me right now, like it's just like it's stereotypes a little bit, but for a reason. Women are
Yeah.
socialized to self-sacrifice for the preservation of our relationships. So we prioritize. Am I getting enough time with the kids? Are they getting attention right now? Are they doing something enriching? Like, da, 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 da. And
Yeah.
so we are prioritizing something very differently. We tend to personalize this stuff in our relationships. Like, how come you don't care as much? You don't care. And it's like, no, this isn't really personal. This is a different sense of priority. And we need to really understand each other so we can like get better on the same wavelength. But
Yeah.
it's really common. But I think feeding into that is that so women self-sacrifice for the preservation of our relationships. We're socialized to really be the caretakers of our relationships. So that means we're also held to different standards and judged by this stuff. So if our house is a mess, if somebody comes over, who are they thinking is responsible for that? If our kids misbehave, are they like, what is their dad doing with us? No, it's what is the mom doing? I said to our son, Roy, he wanted to go to this like thing at night. It was raining. I'm like, wear a coat. He didn't want to wear it. He's like, I'll lose it, which is true. I appreciate his self-awareness. And so I was like, whatever. And I go, but all the moms running the event are going to be like, why didn't his mom make him wear it? Not the dad. So there's a reason, and I think our partners need to hear this. Like sometimes the reason we have such high standards is because we're held to such high standards. And so there's this pressure on us in a different way than there's a pressure on them. And so all of this feeds into part of the reason why we suffer so much from guilt is that from various sources, we have these incredibly high expectations that I think go on overdrive. So they call them impossible standards that we hold ourselves to that are like really unrealistic, but they come from like our socialization, social media, information consumption, all of these different things start to shape them. And when we fall short of these impossible standards, guilt comes in. And so if you're like, well, I don't know what my impossible standards are, fast way to get there is to think about the type of mom I thought I'd be is, or the type of mom I should be is, or even a good mom is. A lot of that is like really quickly unpacks and reveals all of these impossible standards. So you might be like, a good mom spends every free moment, bonding with her children, which like at face
Mhm.
value, you're like, that's absolutely nuts. Like that's not realistic.
Totally.
But it's operating in you.
Uh-huh.
So we have to identify these. We got to put them on the table and we have to adjust them to be more realistic so that we are not constantly falling short because managing all of our guilt adds more to our mental load and we do not need anything else going on there.
Yeah. Wow. It's such a big conversation. Like, feel like we are not even scratching the surface. We're already 45 minutes in. And I'm like, I want to talk about more. But maybe the best way before we can hopefully get a part 2 at some point, maybe the best way to kind of tie this all together is if you could just share maybe your top steps for people really hoping or hearing this that are like, okay, you know what? I think I get it. I think I know what I need to say to my partner or to my support system, but I'm scared to do it. What is like the tip that you're like, this is how you can start to shift the mental load and share that with your partner?
Oh, these are so hard for me. I'm like a big picture.
I know, right? I know.
Okay.
Or is
One
it
is what
just say it, you know?
I mean, one is what I already said, which is like approach it as it is the shared enemy. You have to get to a place where you easily talk about the mental load because it's going to be an ongoing issue for the rest of your life. I have sat with women who are in their late 60s and done interviews with them, and they're like, still, even kids are gone. There's all these precedents that have developed over the years.
Wow.
And so, still dealing with it. So, you have to learn how to do this. I think if you want to shift if there's tension in your relationship, so maybe you're like, we need to talk about it, but it's so like tightly wound that I know even if I bring it up perfectly, they're going to spring and we're going to fall into an argument. So we got to release the tension valve before we can get to having a conversation. Lean into appreciation. It is the number one way to quickly shift the tone in your relationship. I have a formula in my book for appreciation, which is notice. So it can be you can notice something that they see. I'm sorry, notice something that they do or a personal quality about them, plus how it makes your life better. So, for example, and like, it's so funny. My husband for years would say he didn't need any of this appreciation junk. Like, I don't need that. You need that. I don't need that. If I give it to him, he like melts. He totally loves it.
Yes.
So, something like I would say to him would be, I notice how much time you're putting into researching how we like do our investments wisely. And I just want to tell you, it gives me such security in our life and our future. And I love that I never even have to think about it. Thank you for how you take care of us. Like that is like true and deep appreciation that can shift
Yeah.
the tone in your relationship. And sometimes because we're not getting it, we don't want to give it. But somebody has to break that standoff and step toward one another. So that's a really fast way to get there.
I love that. That's a really good one. You said
Okay, I'm
you don't
like,
like
I
those. That was
don't know.
No, that was fantastic. And I feel like that in and of itself, it's not always easy, especially if you're feeling bitter or resentful or whatever. It can be
Exactly.
so hard to then look at that person and be like, wait, but I do love that. I love you. And thank you for that. So I feel like that was a perfect answer.
Okay,
Come
good.
on. Okay. So hopefully we can get a part 2, but I think that's all for today. Tell us one more time where people can find you. We will link it in the episode notes so they can easily get to you, but just tell us one more time, where can they find you? What's
Perfect.
your best resource? Give it to us.
Yeah. Okay. You can find me on Instagram, Doctor. So it's Dr. Morgan Cutlip. My website is the same. My book, A Better Share, which men, like my secret agenda was writing a book men would love to read. And the feedback has been amazing. I put sex on the cover
Awesome.
for a reason. Like they'll read it. And then my other book is How to Love Your Kids Without Losing Yourself. And I just want to mention this week, I actually just launched, I'm working on a suite of courses for the mental load. And all my courses are audio because I just think that's so much easier
Amazing.
to consume. But this is like, I'm so excited about this. I released a course for men, which is kind of risky. But we started the interview by you saying, like, one of the heaviest pieces is having to explain the mental load to your partner. And I wanted to like do that for women because I cannot
Amazing.
figure out another way of helping women with this issue other than me being the deliverer of the information. So I have a course that I just released. It's super affordable. It's called The Brief, a no BS guide
Wow.
to the mental load for men. It explains it. It explains exactly what we want around this topic. And then I have like a companion challenge called The Fix, which is 30 days where like literally every day it's like, say this and then do this. Like
That's
walk them, which is like my
amazing.
husband was always like, I just want to know exactly what I need to do to take care of you. I'm like,
Yeah.
done. I'm going to create this for men everywhere so they have it.
Amazing.
And new courses to follow soon, but those just came out and the reception has been really, really great. So
Oh
I'm
my
excited
gosh,
about it.
congratulations. That is incredible, and I
Thanks.
feel like that's exactly what we need. Like, yes,
Yes.
take that hard part out so we can just figure it out. I love that. Oh my gosh. Well, thank you so much for being here. This was so good, and I am so excited to share this with everybody. Get this information out there and hopefully get your books into their hands so that they can live a better marriage, better
Thank
parent
you.
life, all of it. Thank you so much.
Thanks
All
for
right, we'll talk
having
to you
me.
soon.